Today we're outside Detroit and Cadillac has forced us into a classic philosophical conundrum. To V or not to V, because even though this is only one model year old, Cadillac has put a lot of work into it. Not just in introducing a performance model or dedicated performance model, but some of the changes they made to this. And even though it's going to look pretty similar to the outgoing one, under the skin, well, there are more than a few changes to be found. So let me tell you what we have going on in the Optiq, then we'll jump over to the V, look at some of the differences, and at the end of the day, you get to decide. Even though this is Cadillac's smallest EV model, it still has big front end looks. And a lot of that comes with the signature lighting we get here, very tall and vertical. We have lights that come well into the rest of the front end. And my favorite piece has to be this grille insert, because it's not a real grille. We don't need one. But it still has a design element where a lot of EVs are either just making a very smooth shape here or almost just giving up. And it feels like this is an actual design element that is really built around the vehicle. Of course, there is some cooling. You'll find that down here, but this whole front end isn't going to be terribly aggressive. It's meant to feel premium, and it certainly does that. I don't think it's just me. I love the way this looks, and if there's any argument to be made about the shape of the vehicle, it's not in its design. It may just be about practicality, because this is a pretty coupe-like design. Though it doesn't drop off too terribly much here in the rear, it's just never actually particularly tall. But some of the design elements that we get with this back end, I love. I love that we have a little spoiler here at the very back, and this rear glass having that sort of etched look that matches what we find up front is a really nice way to add some flair to a vehicle, not just any vehicle, but an EV that people tend to think doesn't have quite enough personality, or just cars in general that could always use something a little bit more. When you're picking your Optiq, you can choose between a sport or a luxury, and the biggest difference is not necessarily going to be in equipment, it's going to be in the personality, or some of the accenting pieces that go along. Your darker trim, that's going to be what you find over on the sport. If you're looking for lighter, more chrome, you'll find that over on the luxury side of things. Let's talk powertrain, because there's one big carryover from last year, and that's going to be the battery pack. 85 kilowatt hours is what you'll find in every single Optiq, V or otherwise. Beyond that though, the baby brother of the Lyriq has done some digging through the closet and found a few motors that it took for itself. When this first came out, it was an all-wheel drive only, 300 horsepower, and that's not bad by my imagination, but if you want it better, well, we have it. 315 horsepower is now what this starts as, and that's not all-wheel drive, that's rear-wheel drive. So single motor, rear-wheel drive, and I have to admit, that's probably the one that would tempt me, at least to start. If you want all-wheel drive, you want more performance or better traction, it's now 440 horsepower, which is a huge increase from what we had last year. And that's not even the performance model. Of course, there's a V beyond that, and don't worry, we'll get to that in a second. Another thing has changed though when it comes to its charging. It's still going to be 150 kilowatts, but if you press that charge door opener, what we'll find is no longer a CCS connector. Instead, it's an NACS or JD3400, which means you can plug in native to a Tesla supercharger without having to go ahead and fiddle with any adapters. Of course, you will probably want adapters, but you don't have to for your DC charging. Your level 2 charging is also still a little bit unique. In a vehicle this size and price and size of battery, it seems unusual to me that you can get a 19.2 kilowatt charger, but you still can. So if you want to charge really fast at home, that's the way to do it. It's still going to be slower though on your road trip. I may have mentioned some of the components I like here in the rear, but honestly, it's this whole look. Especially when it comes to the lighting, the Cadillac lighting is just knocked out of the park. I love the way it frames this rear end and does a good job of giving it substance, even though it's not a terribly large vehicle. But it's not just the looks, there is still some practicality here. Even though we don't have a rear wiper, we do have towing capability, about 1,500 pounds, though probably not the reason you're getting an Optiq. But go ahead and press your Cadillac badge there, that's the release for the hatch, and you'll find 26 cubic feet of storage capacity that's behind the second row. If you need more, go ahead and fold that second row down, and you'll get up to about 57 cubic feet, which means your trip to the big box store should be manageable, even if it's not incredibly simple. You might have to do a little more Tetrising than you'd have to do, certainly in something like an Escalade IQ, but this is going to be a little bit easier to drive around town. Now let's take a look through the interior, but I've hopped in the V model. The reason is that the interior design, or at least the layout, is all the same between the models. And honestly, that's probably for the best. There's not one thing missing in the other that you can't find somewhere else, etc., etc. But I have to admit, on this particular model, and with most sports models, it's usually a dark interior, and this is no exception. You'll find a lot of black, but at least here in the seats, there's an interesting stitch design. We also have blue accent stitching, and actually you'll find quite a bit of blue here throughout this interior, like splashes there in the door panel and here on the center button bank. But if you want more blue, with the performance trims, you can get a blue seat belt and a blue seat back if you really want to make it pop, but I'm in an orange car, and that's probably not the combination I'd go with. We're also going to have a lot of adjustability when it comes to the seats, though admittedly more so here in the performance model, because we're able to inflate our bolsters both on the lower cushion and up by your shoulders. No matter what model you get though, it's going to come with a 19 speaker 8kg sound system, and that's going to include Dolby Atmos. Plenty of storage to be found throughout. That was our drive route for the day. We at least got most of that done, and plenty of charge to boot. We're also going to have an interesting mix of textures here. As you can see, like I said, that blue here in accent of the performance trim, but also a nice woven texture that you'll find throughout this interior, not just on the performance, but on every other model. And a little bit of a blue tint to the dashboard, it seems. Let's talk about the other storage before we get to some of the other highlights. You'll find a floating center console here, which means a lot of room, and it's nice and carpeted, so whatever you put in there shouldn't roll around too much. And just above that, you'll find really your only dial, though nice and easily accessible, 2 cup holders, and of course all of this in a gloss carbon fiber surround. The one thing you'll need to know though, your volume knob is going to be this, so volume scroll wheel, not so much a knob. Now on to the main attraction. This is our 33-inch touchscreen, and well, 33-inch screen, most of it touch. That's going to be over here on the left-hand side, and obviously over here on the right for the infotainment. It covers most of this screen, and this is running Android Automotive, but not Android Auto and not Apple CarPlay, because unfortunately GM still says that their system works just fine. We don't need that phone integration, and I know lots of folks who would tend to disagree. Though, that said, this screen is nice and easy to work with. You can get into the Play Store, you can log into a number of your apps through the system. It just may not work as seamlessly as it does with phone projection, and it'd be a hang up for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of others. Let's move over to the driver's screen, where you can go ahead and configure a number of different layouts here. In this case, we've got some information on the left, our music over on the right, and our center dial basically just laid out in front of us. There are a few different ways you can shuffle some things around, but especially in this model, if you press and hold the V button, you'll get a fun animation that runs across, and that means we are powered up. And as you can see, we did get a small change there in that display. But let's move on over to some of the other functions. In this case, we're going to go ahead and adjust the heads-up display. You can see that found over here. We also control our lighting and a few more others, things like our trip and again, our overall layout. That's where you can go ahead and make this really feel like it's your own experience. The steering wheels between the two are going to be the same, including the ability to use Super Cruise, which is our favorite hands-free driving system, at least at the moment, and continues to update just like most of them do. Over here on the steering wheel buttons, you'll find things like driver assist, mostly found on the left-hand side, and over on the right, controls for things like your infotainment. Music volume, track forward, volume up, down, answer the phone, hang up the phone, voice commands, and one of my favorites is going to be this paddle, which is not a paddle shifter, but instead a regenerative paddle. You can, of course, go ahead and adjust the one-pedal driving functions within the display screen, but if you want to turn up that regen even more, or you want to activate regen in some instances but have it off in others, that's a great way to go ahead and use that paddle. But now to something a little bit more exciting, with a little bit more pop, and it starts right up front. We get a lot more black across the top of the grille. We also get more black down below, because when you go with the V, you can also go with some carbon fiber accents. That's going to be the lower splitter here, and honestly, my favorite is going to be the insert you get right in front of that light. It's got its own geometric pattern that pretty closely matches what we get here, but it almost looks like it's carbon fiber on its own. But you don't have to go for fake carbon fiber. There is still some to be found throughout. Like the spoiler on the rear here, which you may also notice is a little bit bigger than we get in the standard Optiq, and in the lower bumper here, which has a diffuser-inspired look, but certainly not as much impact as you'll find on something like a Formula One car. You also find some differences within the wheel arch here. Not just a different wheel design, still 21 inches, but unique to the V. You'll also get summer tires in this case, which can only be optioned with the V, at least from the factory. Further underneath of that, you'll find a suspension differing, not in total design, but in its implementation. In this case, we have a continuously variable damper designed more for control than it is for comfort. And for stopping power, we've definitely got an upgrade here with Brembo brake calipers up front, and obviously the splash of blue because, well, sort of an electric blue look, and the V logo to go along with it. Those are some of the visuals, but let's talk about performance, because while we do get a 440 horsepower all-wheel drive system on the standard, when you go to the V, it has to be more, and it's 80 horsepower more, or just about 519 horsepower, 650 pound-feet of torque, and Cadillac says it'll do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. That is a serious boost over what we get on every other standard, but one downside is we're gonna get a little bit less range. 287 miles, because it is the same battery pack, and obviously we're putting a little bit more power down, not quite as efficient, and that's assuming you don't get the summer tires, which we have on this one. In this case, 250 miles is what it's rated for. So is there a clear winner? Is there an obvious direction to go? Nah, probably not. Unless you are a diehard gearhead or you couldn't care less about a sporty ride or more horsepower. Obviously, that will leave you on your ends of the spectrum. But what's it going to cost to sit on any ends of the spectrum? Well, there's 3 basic tiers to this. On the luxury and the sport model trim, you're going to pay about $56,000, plus or minus depending on which direction. If you go to the premium luxury and premium sport, that's going to be around $58,000. And if you want the V, then you're jumping up all the way to $68,795, which is a noticeable jump from either of the two. But remember, you can go ahead and add some packages somewhere in the middle there on those premium trims. I would argue that what you get on the V is worth the extra money, but that's only if you really plan on utilizing it. Do you need the stickier tires? Well, you can probably get those aftermarket. Do you want the extra horsepower? Well, this is the only way to do that. You're not gonna tune your Optiq in the traditional sense. And if, again, you want something that's the most comfortable way to drive around town, that's not gonna be the way to do it. Not just because it has less sidewall, but because the dampers here are more for control than they are for comfort. But I have to admit, I love what the Optiq brings to the table, and the fact that you have such a wide range of options is not only great for Cadillac, but great for the consumer. As long as this is the size of vehicle you're looking for, and you're looking, again, for a premium touch, I think you should take this for a test drive. There are bigger Cadillac options available, there are plenty of competitors, but at least take it for a spin and see how it works for you. And if you want to see more on this Cadillac Optiq V, we should have a full review in just a few days after that goes live. But that's all for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and like, subscribe, follow us not just here, but on Facebook, on Instagram. Listen to our podcast, the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. Until next time, I'll see you down the road.